Високопреосвяченні владики, всечесніші отці, government representatives, honored guests, дорога громадо. Holodomor. Millions of Ukrainians were starved to death by the Soviet regime led by Joseph Stalin. All grain and food was forcibly seized and the borders were shut. In little more than a year, 1/4 of the population perished. This crime of genocide is known in Ukraine and the world as the Holodomor. Today, we remember the forgotten. My name is Oksana Reva.
And I am Kirilo Reva, the grandson of a Holodomor survivor. Ukrainians had a bountiful harvest in the fall of 1932, but all their crops, vegetables, the wheat they had grown, and all their livestock were confiscated. They had absolutely nothing left. Essentially, they were made to suffer a horrific death, murder by starvation. What happened in 1932 was the commitment of a genocide.
Article 2 of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, drafted in 1948, defines genocide as follows: the killing of members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group, deliberate infliction on the group conditions of life, calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group.
And that is exactly what happened in Ukraine in the years of 1932 to 1933. The most devastating aspect of the genocide was not only the death of the individuals, but the potential loss of a cohesive group who shared a common belief in the unity through language, customs, art, and a shared history. Holodomor was deployed to destroy the physical and psychological essence of a nation, so that areas formerly controlled by the Tsar could be reclaimed by the Kremlin. Today, Putin is doing the same in fueling the war in eastern Ukraine. He is trying to destroy the nation of the Ukrainian people. Today, we honor those silent victims of Holodomor, the heinous crime against humanity and their unbreakable spirit, the survivors and their families. With us today are survivors Mr. Latishko and Mr. Horlach.
Holodomor survivor Semen Rak wrote, and I quote, "Those who were untouched by this tragedy do not understand us, but they need to understand us so that our memory of the victims remains eternal. Only then we will not be simply people, but a nation. Thus, we call upon the voice of a nation still coming to grips with the genocide, which continues to this very day. We would like to call upon the Consul General of Ukraine in Toronto, Ms. Lyudmila Davidovich."
Високопреосвященні отці, високопреосвященні владики, вельмишановна українська громада, distinguished members of Canadian Parliament and Provincial Parliament, thank you for joining us today. As we say in Ukraine, a real friend is a friend in need. Справжній друг пізнається в біді. And today Canada is the most Ukrainian country beyond the borders of Ukraine. Thank you for your support of Ukraine today, and thank you for being with us today when we remember one of the darkest pages of Ukrainian history, Holodomor. Дорогі друзі, я рада привітати вас всіх так тут чисельно, що ми всі разом сьогодні з вами тут зібралися, тому що в єдності наша сила. Разом, друзі, ми завдяки нашій історії, яка поєднує нас, ми пам'ятаємо наші світлі і славні перемоги, які додають нам сил боротися сьогодні. Ми також згадуємо наші сумні, наші темні сторінки історії, які також роблять нас сильнішими. Наше священне моральне право пам'ятати про Голодомор, страшну сторінку української історії, коли більше 4 мільйонів українців були заморені голодом радянським режимом до смерті. А ще 6 мільйонів, друзі, не народилися. Україна втратила через Голодомор 10 мільйонів життів. Дорогі друзі, великий і глибокий наш уклін сьогодні тим, хто вижив. Дякуємо вам за вашу силу, за вашу волю до життя. Сьогодні ви для нас приклад. Завдяки вам ми сьогодні сильні, і ми відчуваємо спадковість наших поколінь. Дорогі друзі, в пік Голодомору щохвилини в Україні помирало 24 людини. За 1 годину помирало майже 1500 людей. І 34,5 тисячі людей помирало в Україні кожного дня. Український парламент визнав Голодомор 1932-33 років геноцидом. Багато демократичних держав світу визнали Голодомор геноцидом. І наше завдання, наш святий обов'язок працювати і надалі, аби всі до єдиної держави світу визнали очевидний факт. Голодомор 1932-1933 років був геноцидом українського народу. Пам'ять про загиблих в ті дні сьогодні робить нас сильнішими, коли ми боремося за державний суверенітет та незалежність української держави. Сьогодні агресор на сході України фактично повторює найтемнішу сторінку історії України, діючи тими методами, створюючи штучний геноцид українського народу в цій частині нашої держави. Наше завдання – боротися за звільнення нашої території, наше завдання – спинити агресора, і в цьому абсолютна і унікальна сила наших українських громад у всьому світі і нашої української громади в Канаді. Дякую вам, друзі, за нашу спільну роботу, за нашу єдність. Вірю в нашу спільну перемогу. Ще раз сьогодні, друзі, згадуємо з глибоким сумом жертв Голодомору. Віримо, що їхні невинні душі стали на небесах ангелами. І віримо в те, що їхні страждання не були марними. І сьогодні вони додадуть нам сил, аби ми досягли разом нашої спільної перемоги. Слава Україні, друзі!
Thank you, Consul General of Ukraine. Щиро дякую. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Paul Gorod, who is the President of Ukrainian Canadian Congress, who's also here with us today.
We would like to acknowledge the presence of the following MPs with us this afternoon: Ms. Julie Żarowicz and Mr. Boris Sosnowski. And to speak, we call upon Boris Sosnowski, who on June 5th, 2007, in Ottawa, introduced in the House of Commons a private member's bill, C-459, to establish a Ukrainian Holodomor Genocide Remembrance Day.
Шановні і дорогі наші пани Латишко і Горлач, очевидці страхіття Голодомору, преосвященні владики, всечесніші отці, шановна громадо, it's my solemn task and responsibility to be here on behalf of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who finds himself in Paris. And I bring words in memoriam on behalf of the Federal Liberal Caucus. This weekend, we memorialize the 82nd anniversary of the Holodomor, the famine genocide of Ukraine's rural population in 1932-33. During those years, Stalin and his Kremlin apparatchiks put in place an evil master plan for Ukrainians. Behind barbed wire, Ukraine became a hell on earth. Her lush countryside, denuded of leaves and grasses, as people ate anything that grew. It became a land where no birds sang, where no grasses rustled, where the deathly silence in villages was broken only by wagons picking up the dead. One by one, 100 after 100, 1,000 after 1,000, million after million laid their skin and bone bodies down onto Ukraine's fertile black soil and became one with their land, their lives extinguished. As millions starved to death through a politically planned famine genocide in the very breadbasket of Europe, Stalin was exporting millions of tons of grain from Ukraine's fertile lands to Western markets. Stalin's march toward empire was fed by the corpses of millions of Ukrainians and the appeasement of world leaders unwilling to face down evil. Apart from a handful of brave politicians and journalists, the West largely turned its gaze away while eating the bounty, the bread of those starving lands. As we memorialize the Holodomor, let us also not lose sight that today a new evil has been visited upon these same lands. Thousands have laid down their lives. Stalin used Potemkin villages and journalists such as Duranty. Today, Putin uses hybrid warfare and little green men, RTV International and internet trolls. To the millions of innocent victims of the Holodomor from humanity's tragic past, let us make a pledge of two simple words: Bільш ніколи, never again. And to the thousands who died during Russia's invasions of these same lands in Ukraine during the past 2 years, we pledge no appeasement. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Radomskiy.
With us today, we have the following representatives from the provincial legislature. Mr. Ivan Baker, MPP for Etobicoke Centre, who is also a grandson of a Holodomor survivor. Mr. Peter Milchin, MPP for Etobicoke Lakeshore. Mr. John Yakabuski, MPP for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke. And Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario leader, Mr. Patrick Brown, MPP for Simcoe North. Mr. Baker, we would like to call upon you to speak.
Слава Ісусу Христу! Високопресвященніші владики, всечесніші отці, дорога українська громадо. It is my honor to be here today as a member of the provincial legislature, to be here on behalf of our Premier Kathleen Wynne, but also to be here as the grandson of a Holodomor survivor. Today we pay tribute. Today we commemorate the Holodomor, a time when Joseph Stalin closed Ukraine's borders, confiscated all food, to destroy a Ukrainian population that was opposed to his rule, a population that sought the same freedom, the same independence that the people of Ukraine are fighting for today. You heard the figures that the consul shared with us: 24 people per minute, 1,500 per hour, 34,000 people per day were dying of famine. The world was silent, and millions died as a result. Today we have with us two survivors of the Holodomor. Many of you are descendants of victims and survivors of the Holodomor. My Baba was a survivor of the Holodomor. My Baba didn't talk about the Holodomor. In fact, I learned about the Holodomor through my mother and through family. But my Baba did once share that she hoped the victims of the Holodomor would not only be remembered, but honored. Honored, she said, meant not just remembering or commemorating, but learning about the Holodomor, learning about the mistakes that were made, and making sure that they never happen again. That is why it is so important that the next generation of young people, not just Ukrainian Canadians, but all Canadians, all young people around the world, learn about the Holodomor. That is why I'm proud to be here with members of our community, leaders amongst our community, who have worked so hard to make that happen, who have worked with the provincial government to ensure that the Holodomor is in the curriculum so that every young person in Ontario has the opportunity to learn about the Holodomor, who have worked so hard alongside members of the community, alongside the provincial government, to create the vision, to find the funding for something called the Holodomor Mobile Classroom, which is here today. And I was asked to share with all of you that it's in the back in the parking lot, and that you will all, I urge you all to take the moment after today's ceremony, today's service, to visit it. The Holodomor Mobile Classroom, which is funded through private sources through the provincial government, will travel across the country to teach young people of all backgrounds about the Holodomor. Today I hope that we take this opportunity to remember, to commemorate, but also to redouble our efforts to ensure that we learn about the Holodomor, that we teach about the Holodomor, so that tragedies like this one, so that crimes like this one, crimes like the one that's happening in Ukraine right now, stop and never happen again. Let us do as my grandmother would have asked if she were here, as so many survivors would ask if they were here, so many victims would ask if they were here. Let us remember the victims, let us commemorate the victims, and let us honor. Vічна їм пам'ять.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for sharing those words. And now we would like to invite Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party leader, Mr. Patrick Brown, for his remarks.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here today. I'm joined by my colleague, MPP John Yakubowski, and if I could echo the words of Yvonne and Boris before, you know, one of the things I love about our country is that no matter what political party you come from, no matter what your perspective, we are all unequivocal friends of Ukraine. And I thought, Yvonne and Boris, your words were eloquent, and I certainly agree with your sentiments. I wanted to share a quote today with you that I found thinking of this occasion from Kofi Annan. A genocide begins with the killing of one person, not because of what he has done, but because of who he is. What begins with the failure to uphold the dignity of life, all too often ends with a calamity for an entire nation. I think it's very appropriate when we remember what happened with the Holodomor. On this somber day, I join with Ukrainians in Ontario, in Canada, and around the world to remember the victims of the Holodomor, the Ukrainian genocide. Holodomor was a famine in which millions of Ukrainians needlessly lost their lives, were targeted, and intentionally and systematically starved to death in 1932 and 1933 by the communist dictatorship. It was the Soviet regime's deliberate seizure of Ukrainian crops and refusal to provide food relief that turned Europe's breadbasket into a land of immeasurable human suffering. Despite decades of oppressive rule, Ukrainians refused to abandon their drive for freedom and independence. Today, Ukraine faces new challenges to her territory and independence. Once again, Ukrainian people have demonstrated and continue to demonstrate their unyielding commitment to human dignity. Ukraine's current struggle for freedom and democracy is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of its people and honors the memory of the many who perished under Stalin's brutal rule. The Ukrainian Canadian community, which has made many significant contributions to our province and this country over many generations, has been key in ensuring that we properly honor the memory of those who perished in one of our greatest tragedies of the last century. By commemorating the victims of the Holodomor, we remind Ontarians that we share a responsibility to advance freedom, human rights, and the rule of law, and to oppose tyranny in all its forms. Today, I join with all Ontarians, particularly Ontarians and Canadians of Ukrainian origin, in solemnly making the anniversary of this crime against humanity, and to say we will never forget, and we will always stand shoulder to shoulder in unequivocal friendship with our friends in Ukraine. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Our next remarks will be those of Her Worship, Mayor of Mississauga, Bonnie Crombie.
Your Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, Holodomor survivors, Council General, Slava Isusu Christo. On behalf of the City of Mississauga and my members of Council, Christina Fonseca from Ward 3, also of Ukrainian background, is here with me today, and we join the city's Ukrainian community to remember and to mark the Holodomor. Mississauga is blessed to be home to a vibrant and very large Ukrainian community we are so very proud of. It's such a large and compassionate and engaged community. And at the heart of this community is this very church, St. Mary's, which opens its doors to the families and residents to worship under the leadership of Father Reverend Roman Pankiw. I'd like to thank the leadership of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, including Paul Gorod and Taras Bahri of the Toronto branch for both, in bringing the communities together to mourn the millions who lost their lives during the Holodomor. From 1932 and 1932 to tens of millions, Ukrainians were deliberately starved to death by the brutal regime led by the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. All grain and food were forcibly seized to break the will of the Ukrainians for self-determination, but Ukrainians steely determination. The borders were shut. In a little more than a year, more than a quarter of the population perished. This crime of genocide is known as the Holodomor. And during November, communities around the world mourn these crimes against humanity. We also pause to thank our leaders at all levels of government, you've heard them today, who helped ensure that the recognition of the Holodomor as a genocide. It is incumbent upon all of us to teach future generations about what has taken place and to ensure that we do our part to stand up to these injustices and others happening around the world. As we look toward the hope and the promise of 2016, let us all wish peace and goodwill to communities and families in Ukraine and throughout the world. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and with the families who continue to mourn the loss of innocent lives which were taken during the Holodomor. Vitichna, Pomet. May their memories be eternal. Jankivam.
Your Worship, thank you so much for your heartfelt remarks. As we mentioned earlier, there are Holodomor survivors with us this afternoon. They are not only victims of this genocide, for the Holodomor has had a great impact on their families, their children, and their grandchildren, who have been defined by the survivors' history, even though they did not live through the Holodomor. We would like to ask Ms. Bogdanka Sturin, granddaughter of Holodomor survivor, Mr. Stefan Horlaj, to speak.
Slava Isusu Christu! Slava Ukraini! My name is Danya Stern. My grandfather was 11 years old at the time of the Holodomor, and he survived it. Why remember the Holodomor? The obvious responses remain, of course. We are doomed to repeat history unless we study it, remember it, teach it to our children. To know our own history helps to bring us to a new understanding and appreciation of the history of others. Likewise, to know the history of others enables us to better understand ourselves. But I would argue that we do not simply remember the Holodomor from year to year. For one thing, we actively use this opportunity to pray for the deceased as well as for the souls of those culpable in cruelty, something we are called upon to do by our faith and our own conscience. But in addition, each passing year allows us the chance not only to uncover vital new information regarding the details of the Holodomor itself, but we have collectively begun with each new discovery, with every new mention of the event in a foreign newspaper of the time, with each investigation into its effects, to begin to make connections, to see patterns emerging. How much of Ukraine's current conflict in the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, brother pitted against brother, parent against child, has its roots in the mistrust and betrayals engendered by collectivization, starvation, mass arrest and deportations of Ukrainian citizens in the 1930s until the end of the Stalin era and beyond? What relevance does the soul-destroying suffering of Holodomor survivors have to the current astronomical rates of suicide, alcohol, and drug use in Ukraine? We can thank Carleton University researcher Brent Bezos, as well as many others, for addressing these and countless other questions raised with each new discovery. Події цих жахітних часів полишали сліди на людях і сім'ях, на суспільстві і на нашому народі. Це наш людський обов'язок помогти один одному по дорозі до зцілення і до єдності. I bear no grudges against those who arrested and killed my great-grandfather and then attempted to starve to death the young child who would later become my grandfather, placing on his young shoulders a physical and emotional burden no child should ever have to bear. The wounds inflicted on my grandparents and their descendants, on the millions of other survivors and their family members, cannot be healed through bitterness or malice towards the perpetrators of this tragedy. I do not yearn to compare Ukrainian suffering with that of any other religious or ethnic group or nation. I am, however, adamant that the truth about the Ukrainian Holodomor genocide and the myriad other black deeds of the Kremlin perpetrated then and now must be revealed to the light of day. It is clear that when a Russian poll done in 2008 finds the greatest Russian of all time to be Joseph Stalin, a man who, directly or indirectly, was responsible for between 20 and 40 million deaths during his 29-year reign, and who is not even Russian, but Georgian. History has more than a small chance of repeating itself. I never had the privilege of meeting my great-grandparents in person, yet I hold in my heart the image of my great-grandfather, wise, hardworking, and loyal to his family, his people, and his land destroyed for owning a cow and a few chickens, and more to the point, for stubbornly believing in his God-given right and responsibility to lovingly care for his family and to till his bit of land. I carry there also my great-grandmother, humble, resourceful, brave, whose fierce determination, love of her family, and faith in God helped her to keep her young family alive through the bitter winter of 1932 to 1933. Вічна їм та всім жертвам Голодомору пам'ять.
Thank you, Ms. Bogdanka Studin, for sharing those special and personal insights.
So we ask you, if these hidden crimes of humanity, the planned exterminations, and man-made famines were globally known, would there have been less victims? Most definitely. And this is precisely why we are gathered today, to commemorate and to bring attention to this massive atrocity, Holodomor. We have to be aware of such terrible events so that they never reoccur. We must be vigilant, for even today, many such evils are showing their ugly faces in the world. Beirut, Donbass, Luhansk, Paris, and so on. it is important that all citizens of the world continue to recognize the Holodomor as an inhuman evil that has led to the unnecessary death of so many.
For our closing remarks, we call upon Mr. Taras Bahri, President of Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Toronto Branch.
Слава Ісусу Христу! Many stirring comments have been made by our MCs and guests today. We as Canadians and Ukrainians have a great responsibility to be the voice of those victims who could never tell their story. And it is in that light we would like to thank our clergy and all those present for praying for the soul of the victims. As well, on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Toronto branch, we would like to thank the federal and provincial governments and all the parties for their unanimous action in Parliament in recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide against the Ukrainian people. Our voices need to prevail so that the denial of food is never to be used as a weapon anywhere, ever again. We ask you tonight, at the time of 1932 to 1933, in unison with Ukrainian all over the world, to have a moment of reflection as you light the candle in memory of those souls. As you exit the church, please take a piece of bread that our eminences have blessed. And remember that no one should ever be denied their daily bread. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bahri. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of Trustee Chris Glover from Etobicoke Center, who is also here with us today.
Again, we would like to thank our spiritual leaders, elected government officials, the survivors and their families, and all of you who have joined us today. Together, we will continue to fight for the values we cherish in Canada: freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law.
On this solemn occasion, as we remember the victims of the Holodomor, we remember the devastation of a genocide orchestrated by a totalitarian regime to quell a nation's aspirations for independence. The effects of that act upon the Ukrainian nation resonates to this very day. To everyone in attendance, remember that the price of freedom is constant vigilance. Your presence today declares that the current and future generations will not forget the victims of Holodomor, those murdered by starvation, and all those who have died under oppression and terror. This commemoration strengthens our resolve to reject intolerance and to protect the rights and dignity of every citizen in every community.
Thus, tonight, when you sit down for your evening meal, please light a candle in memory of all those who have perished in the Holodomor, for all those that have been killed and murdered in trying to preserve the Ukrainian nation, and for all those who have been victims of evil and terror.
May their memory be eternal. Вечная память. We would like to call on Father would like to say a few words.
Зараз, коли будемо виходити з храму, прошу взяти кусочок чорного хліба і згадати наших братів і сестер, які були замордовані голодом в 32-33 році. Зі святими упокой, Христе, душі слуг Твоїх, братів і сестер наших, які голодом були замордовані на нашій батьківщині, ненці Україні, де немає ні болю, ні печалі, ні зітхання, а життя безконечне. Надробне ридання творящим піснь. Алелуя, алелуя, алелуя. Вічная пам'ять, вічная пам'ять, вічная пам'ять. Слава Ісусу Христу!
Слава My name is Arif Virani. I'm the Member of Parliament for Parkdale High Park. I'm here to show solidarity and support of the Ukrainian Canadian community here in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto Area, as well as in my riding. Commemorating the Holodomor is a very, very important event, but it's not something that should be commemorated only once per year. I believe strongly in the efforts to educate Canadians of all backgrounds, cultures, religions, and races about what transpired in the 1930s with the Ukrainian community, how they were targeted with a cultural genocide on the part of Joseph Stalin, and the numbers of people that perished and the legacy that lasts to this day in that regard. I feel strongly in terms of emphasizing that I stand and my party and my caucus stands in support of the people of Ukraine, in emphasizing and raising awareness about this issue. I'm very proud that the government of Canada, as well as the government of Ontario, is promoting the Holodomor bus that is traveling both throughout the province and throughout the country, and perhaps even throughout the continent, to raise awareness about this important issue. So please understand that you have my support, my respect, and my commemoration of this important event of our collective history. Thank you.